I am Emily, a 33-year-old linguist, and this is my story of an unusual marriage and a career that keeps me globetrotting. My life took a fascinating turn after graduating when I joined a software company. This company wasn't just any ordinary workplace, it was a gateway to the world. They sent me to various countries to understand how our hotel management software could be adapted to different cultures. This was not just about technology. It was about blending it with the unique ways people lived and worked in different parts of the world. It was a job that fit perfectly with my love for languages and cultures, but it also meant being away from home for several months at a time. These trips were eye-opening. I found myself in bustling cities and quiet towns, each with their own rhythm and way of life. I met hoteliers and staff, learned about their daily challenges, and gathered insights on how our software could make their work easier and more efficient. Every country had its own story, and I was there to listen and learn. But as exciting as my job was, it often left me feeling disconnected from my own life back home. At 28, during a brief return to my home city, I met John. He was different from anyone I had ever known, kind, grounded, and with a smile that instantly made me feel at ease. He worked in the city, loved art, and had a quiet strength about him that I found incredibly attractive. We connected instantly, and despite my frequent travels, our relationship blossomed. We shared our days over calls, sent each other photos and messages, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. 2 years later, when I was 30, John and I got married. It was a beautiful ceremony, a perfect blend of our worlds. I felt like the luckiest person alive. John understood my career and supported it. He never made me feel guilty for my travels, and his love gave me strength. But after marriage, my job didn't slow down. If anything, it became more demanding. I traveled even more from one country to another, immersing myself in different cultures, but always missing John and our home. Then came a trip that lasted 3 long months. I was in Asia, immersed in a complex project. When it was finally time to return, I was thrilled at the thought of seeing John and being in our home again. I imagined a warm welcome, a cozy evening together, catching up on all that we missed. But when I walked into our house, it was messy, not like the neat home I remembered. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it aside, thinking John must have been busy. However, when John came home that evening, something was off. His greeting was lackluster, almost as if my return was an everyday occurrence. He seemed more absorbed in his phone than in the fact that we hadn't seen each other in months. My heart sank a little, but I tried to shake off the feeling, thinking maybe he had a hard day at work. At dinner, I couldn't ignore the feeling of distance between us. I asked him if everything was okay, hoping to bridge the gap that seemed to have formed in my absence. His response was brief and dismissive, blaming work stress. I wanted to understand, to be supportive, but his coldness stung. I lay in bed that night, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. Had our marriage changed in these months I was away? The doubts and the feeling of isolation grew, leaving me to wonder what the future held for us. The next day, the tension between John and me worsened. I woke up hoping that the previous night's discomfort was just a momentary blip in our marriage, a small hiccup that would resolve itself with the light of a new day. But I was wrong. The air was thick with unspoken words and the remnants of last night's argument. John was already up, his back to me as he made coffee in the kitchen. There was a certain stiffness in his movements, a deliberate avoidance that made my heart sink. I tried to break the ice, asking about his day ahead, but his responses were clipped, laced with an unfamiliar sarcasm that stung. His comments about my work were harsh, almost disdainful. It was as if he was a different person, one who resented not just my job, but my very presence. Our relationship, once a source of strength and comfort, was fraying at the edges. The connection we had nurtured over calls and messages during my travels seemed to unravel right before my eyes. I couldn't understand this change in him. He had always been supportive of my career, proud even, but now it was as if he saw my job as an adversary, something that had stolen me away from him. Amidst this growing chasm, a call from my mother-in-law came as an unexpected interruption. She proposed a family trip to Hawaii, a suggestion that under normal circumstances would have been a delightful opportunity for family bonding. But knowing her general dislike for me, I was hesitant. Our relationship had always been cordial at best, and I couldn't help but wonder if this trip was another subtle way of creating a wedge in my already strained marriage. Despite my reservations, I found myself agreeing to help with the arrangements. It was a reluctant decision, driven more by a sense of obligation than enthusiasm. I couldn't refuse, not when it seemed like a chance, however slim, to mend fences, both with John and his mother. The atmosphere at home continued to be strained. John's behavior oscillated between cold indifference and sharp, cutting remarks. It felt like he was using every opportunity to express his dissatisfaction with my job with me. His words left me feeling deflated, questioning my worth in this marriage that once felt like a haven. Later that day, John came home with an air of expectancy. He casually mentioned that he expected me to finance the entire expenses of the Hawaii trip. The way he said it, with a tone of entitlement and a hint of demeaning undertone, took me aback. It was unlike him to make such financial demands, especially in such a dismissive manner. The financial aspect was not the issue. I was more than willing to contribute to a family vacation, but it was his approach, the lack of discussion, the assumption that I would just comply without a word. It added another layer of strain to our already troubled relationship. Amidst the tumultuous planning for the trip, a moment came that further compounded my worries. I overheard John talking on the phone. His voice was hushed, but the words I caught sent a chill down my spine. He mentioned a passport and something about introducing someone to his mother after the trip. The conversation seemed covered, laced with a sense of secrecy that was alarming. I was taken aback. My mind raced with questions and fears. Who was he planning to introduce to his mother? Why the secrecy? And what did this mean for our marriage? A part of me wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but another part, a more cautious side, suggested I wait and watch. I decided to be cautious, to gather more information before jumping to any conclusions. This revelation, however, weighed heavily on my mind. I felt a growing sense of unease, a suspicion that John might be entangled in something, or with someone, that could explain the recent change in his behavior. The thought was distressing, and I struggled to focus on the trip preparations, my mind constantly returning to that overheard conversation. As the days passed, my internal turmoil grew. I was caught in a storm of emotions, hurt from John's coldness, confusion over his secretive conversation, and anxiety about the upcoming trip with his family. It felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to balance my crumbling marriage on one side and my own sanity on the other. The preparation for the trip continued, with me playing a significant part in the planning and organization. But my heart wasn't in it. Each reservation I made, every itinerary I planned, felt like a step towards an uncertain future, one where the foundation of my marriage was shaky and trust was eroding. The night before our departure, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent, but my mind was a cacophony of fears and doubts. What was awaiting us in Hawaii? Would this trip be a turning point in our marriage, for better or worse? And most importantly, what was John hiding? On the day of the trip, a sense of trepidation mixed with determination filled me as I prepared to leave for my in-laws. With my passport securely in my pocket, I braced myself for what was to come. The situation at home had left me on edge, but I was resolute to face whatever lay ahead. Arriving at my in-laws' place, the atmosphere was tense, almost palpable with unspoken plots. My mother-in-law greeted me with a smug look, an expression that sent a chill down my spine. It was a look that hinted at some inner triumph, a secret plan coming to fruition. I tried to maintain a composed exterior, but my mind was racing, trying to piece together what she could be planning. Then, in a moment that felt both surreal and horrifying, I watched as my mother-in-law triumphantly produced a passport and, with a malicious grin, set it on fire. The flames licked at the pages, turning them to ashes right before my eyes. She believed it to be my passport, a cruel ploy to exclude me from the family trip, a plan seemingly supported by my husband, John. The scene was shocking, a blatant display of betrayal and malice. But amidst the chaos, I held onto a crucial fact: the passport they were burning wasn't mine. With a mix of shock and relief, I revealed that my passport was safely with me, pulling it out of my pocket. The passport they had destroyed was, in fact, John's. This revelation threw their plan into complete disarray. John's expression turned from smug satisfaction to utter disbelief and fury. He stared at the remains of his own passport, now a useless pile of ashes. The realization of what his mother had done, what he had been a part of, seemed to hit him hard. The argument that ensued between John and his mother was bitter and loud. Accusations were hurled, and their true intentions laid bare for all to see. It was a painful spectacle, watching the family I had married into tear each other apart, revealing the depths of their deceit. In the midst of this turmoil, I found a strength I didn't know I had. I stood up to them, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I expressed my disgust at their betrayal and deceit, my words sharp and clear. I couldn't believe that the people I had considered family could stoop so low, could plan something so cruel and heartless. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, but it also brought a sense of clarity. I realized that this was not just a simple family feud or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of malice, a plot to hurt and exclude me. And my husband, the man I had loved and trusted, had been a part of it. In that moment, I vowed to seek justice, to not let this betrayal go unanswered. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead would be filled with challenges and hardtack. But I also knew that I couldn't let them win, couldn't let their deceitful actions destroy me. As I stood there, amidst the ashes of what used to be John's passport, I felt a resolve building within me. I was determined to stand up for myself, to fight against the injustice that had been done to me. I would not be a passive victim in their twisted game. The fire that had consumed John's passport also ignited a fire within me, a fire of courage and determination. I looked at John and his mother, their faces a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. It was clear that their relationship was strained, fractured by the very plot they had concocted against me. John's furious blaming of his mother and her defensive retorts only highlighted the toxic dynamics that I had become entangled in. The revelation of their true intentions was a painful but necessary unveiling. It exposed the harsh reality of my situation, the kind of people I was dealing with. My marriage, which I had entered with love and hope, had become a battleground of betrayal. I realized then that this was not just about a ruined trip or a burned passport. It was about respect, trust, and decency, all of which had been violated in the most hurtful way. My relationship with John, once based on love and mutual respect, had been irreparably damaged by his involvement in this cruel scheme. As I stood my ground, expressing my contempt for their actions, I felt a sense of empowerment. It was a defining moment, one where I chose to stand up for myself, to not be broken by their betrayal. I knew the road ahead would be tough, filled with difficult decisions and challenging times. But I also knew that I deserved better, that I had to fight for my dignity and self-respect. Their plan had backfired, and in its failure, it had revealed their true colors. It was a moment of painful truth, but also one of powerful revelation. I was no longer the passive player in their game. I was now a woman determined to seek justice and reclaim her life from the ashes of deceit. After the shocking passport incident, chaos ensued, unraveling the fabric of what I once thought was a stable family life. John's father, upon learning the truth about the plot against me, was furious. The anger and disappointment in his eyes were unmistakable. It was clear that this revelation had deeply shaken him, not just because of the canceled trip, but because of the deceit and betrayal that had come to light within his own family. The consequences were swift and severe. The Hawaii trip, which had been the subject of so much planning and anticipation, was immediately canceled. The fallout was dramatic. John's mother, the architect of the cruel passport plot, found herself facing the repercussions of her actions. The betrayal was too much for John's father to bear. In a move that shocked everyone, he filed for divorce, severing the long-standing bond that had held their family together. It was a sad and stark reminder of how one act of malice could ripple through and destroy relationships. But the repercussions didn't stop there. John, my husband, who had supported his mother's malicious scheme, found himself disowned by his father. The revelation of his involvement in the plot not only ruined our marriage, but also shattered his relationship with his father. It was a downfall that was painful to witness, yet a consequence of his own actions. In the midst of this turmoil, I sought legal advice. The betrayal I had endured was not something I could simply forgive and forget. I filed for divorce from John, demanding alimony as compensation for the emotional and psychological harm his actions had caused. This legal move added to the financial strain John and his mother were already facing. They found themselves in a dire situation, having to borrow money to meet the alimony demands. It was a stark turn of events for them, a fall from grace that was both rapid and severe. As for John, his personal life spiraled downwards. He lost his new girlfriend, a relationship that had perhaps been one of the reasons behind his change in behavior towards me. Struggling to cope with the financial and emotional fallout, he was forced to navigate a life significantly different from the one he had known, now alongside his equally troubled mother. Meanwhile, I embarked on a new journey, one of personal liberation and growth. With the alimony money, I rented a condo, a space that was entirely my own. It was in this new home that I found solace and peace, away from the toxicity and deceit of my marriage. This solitude was not lonely, rather, it was empowering, a sanctuary where I could heal and rebuild myself. Liberated from the shackles of my toxic marriage, I rediscovered my passion for work and personal development. I embraced my career with renewed vigor, eager to continue my travels and cultural explorations. Each trip, each new cultural experience, was a step towards healing, a reminder of the strength and resilience I possessed. My story, which began with a tale of an unusual marriage and a globe-trotting career, concludes on a note of freedom and happiness. It's a stark contrast to the deceit and oppression I endured in my marriage. The end of this challenging chapter in my life marks the beginning of a brighter, more hopeful future. A future where my resilience and strength are the guiding lights, leading me to new adventures and personal fulfillment.